Hello. Today I'm reading from Sources for America's History, Volume 2, edited by Kevin Sheets. This is a reading from Paul Goodman, from who wrote a book in 1960 called Growing Up Absurd. When the existing state of things is suddenly measured by people against far higher standards than they've been used to, it's no longer the case that there are no alternatives. People are forced by their better judgment to ask very basic questions. Is it possible? How is it possible to have more meaning and honor in work? To put wealth to some real use? To have a high standard of living of whose quality we are not ashamed? To get social justice for those who have been shamefully left out? To have use of leisure that is not a dismaying waste of 100 million adults? The large group of independent people who have been out of the swim with their old-fashioned virtues suddenly have something admirable about them. One is surprised that they still exist, and their existence is relevant. And from the members of the organized system itself come acute books criticizing the shortcomings of the organized system. It is my belief that we are going to have a change. And once the Americans can recover from their mesmerized condition and its astounding political apathy, our country will be in a most fortunate situation. For the kinds of radical change we need are those that are appropriate to a fairly general prosperity. They are practicable. They can be summed up as simply restoring, in J.K. Galbraith's phrase, the social balance that we have allowed to become lopsided and running away at the present abuse of the country's wealth. For instance, since we have a vast surplus productivity, we can turn to finding jobs that will bring out a youth's capacity. So we really conserve human resources. We can find ways to restore to a worker a say in his production, so really do something for manly independence. Since we have a problem of what to do with leisure, we can begin to think of necessary community enterprises that want doing, and that people can enthusiastically and spontaneously throw themselves into, and be proud of the results. For example, beautifying our hideous small towns. And perhaps thereby create us a culture again. Since we have the technology, the capital, and the labor, why should we not have livable cities? We see groups of boys and young men disaffected from the dominant society. The young men are angry and beat. The boys are juvenile delinquents. These groups are not small, and they will grow larger. Certainly they are suffering. Demonstrably, they are not getting enough out of our wealth and civilization. They are not growing up to full capacity. They are failing to assimilate much of the culture. As was predictable, most of the authorities and all of the public spokesmen explain it by saying there has been a failure of socialization. They say that background conditions have interrupted socialization and must be improved, and not enough effort has been made to guarantee belonging. There must be better bait or punishment. But perhaps there has not been a failure of communication. Perhaps the social message has been communicated clearly to the young men and is unacceptable. In this book I shall therefore take the opposite tack and ask, socialization to what? To what dominant society and available culture? And if this question is asked, we must at once ask the other question, is the harmonious organization to which the young are inadequately socialized perhaps against human nature or not worthy of human nature, and therefore there is difficulty in growing up? If that is so, the disaffected of the young is profound. Disaffection of the young is profound and will not be fully remediable by better techniques of socialization. Instead, there will have to be changes in our society and its culture so as to meet the appetites and capacities of human nature in order to grow up. This brings me to another proposition about growing up, and perhaps the main theme of this book. Growth, like any ongoing junction, requires adequate objects in the environment to meet the needs and capacities of the growing child, boy, youth, young man, until he can better choose and make his own environment. It is not a psychological question of poor influence and bad attitudes, but an objective question of real opportunities for worthwhile experience. It makes no difference whether the growth is normal or distorted. The only real objects will finish the experience. Even in the psychotherapy of adults, one finds that many a stubborn symptom vanishes if there is a real change in the vocational and sexual opportunities, so that the symptom is no longer needed. It is here that the theory of belonging and socialization breaks down miserably, for it can be shown, I intend to show, that with all the harmonious belonging and all the tidying up of background conditions that you please, our abundant society is at present simply deficient in many of the most elementary objective opportunities and worthwhile goals that could make growing up possible. It is lacking in enough man's work. It is lacking in honest public speech, and people are not taken seriously. It is lacking in the opportunity to be useful. It thwarts aptitude and creates stupidity. It corrupts ingenious patriotism. It corrupts the fine arts. It shackles science. It dampens animal ardor. It discourages the religious convictions of justification and vocation and dims the sense that there is a creation. It has no honor. It has no community. Thwarted or starved in the important objects proper to young capacities, the boys and young men naturally find or invent deviant objects for themselves. That is the beautiful shaping power of our human nature. Their choices and inventions are rarely charming, usually stupid, and often disastrous. We cannot expect average kids to deviate with genius. But on the other hand, the young men who conform to dominant society become for the most part apathetic, disappointed, cynical, and wasted. I say the young men and boys rather than the young people because the problems I want to discuss in this book belong primarily in our society to the boys. How to be useful and make something of yourself. A girl does not have time she is not expected to make something of herself. Her career does not have to be self-justifying, for she will have children, which is absolutely self-justifying, like any other natural or creative act. With this background, it is less important, for instance, what job an average woman works until she is married. The quest for the glamour job is given at least little substance by its relation to a better marriage. Correspondingly, our youth troubles are boy troubles. Female delinquency is sexuality, incorrigibility, and unmarried pregnancy. Yet, as every woman knows, these problems are intensely interesting to women, for if the boys do not grow to be men, where shall the women find the men? If the husband is running a rat race of the organized system, there is not much farther for the children. Our society, which is not geared to the cultivation of its young, is geared to a profitable, expanding production, a so-called high standard of living of mediocre value, and a maintenance of nearly full employment. Politically, the chief of these is full employment. In a crisis, when profitable production is temporarily curtailed, government spending increases and jobs are manufactured. In normalcy, a condition of slow boom, the easy credit, installment buying, and artificially induced demand for useless goods creates jobs for all and good profits for some. Now, back in the 30s, when the New Deal attempted by hook or crook to put people back to work and give them money to revive the shattered economy, there was an outcry of moral indignation from the conservatives that many of the jobs were boondoggling, useless make work. It was insisted, and rightly, that such work was demoralizing to the workers themselves. It is a question of word, but a candid critic might certainly say that many of the jobs in our present normal production are useless made work. The tail fins and built-in obsolescence might be called boondoggling. The $64,000 question and the busy hum of Madison Avenue might certainly be called boondoggling. Certain tax dodge foundations are boondoggling. What of business lunches and expense accounts, fringe benefits, the comic categories of occupation in the building trades, the extra stagehands and musicians of the theater craft? These jolly devices to put money back to work no doubt have a demoralizing effect on somebody or other. Certainly on me, they make me green with envy. But where is the moral indignation from top management? Suppose we would cut out the boondoggling and gear our society to a more sensible abundance, with efficient production of quality goods, distribution in a natural market, counterinflation, and sober credit. At once the work week would be cut to, say, 20 hours instead of 40. Important people have already mentioned the figure 30. Or alternatively, half the labor force would be unemployed. Suppose too, and how can we not suppose it, that the automatic machines are used generally rather than just to get rid of badly organized, unskilled labor. Unemployment will still be more drastic. Everybody knows this. Nobody wants to talk about it much, for we don't know how to cope with it. The effect is that we're living a kind of lie. Long ago, labor leaders used to fight for the shorter work week, but now they don't, because they're pretty sure they don't want it. Indeed, when hours are reduced, the tendency is to get a second part-time job and raise the standard of living, because the job is meaningless and one must have something. But the standard of living is pretty meaningless too. Nor is this strange atmosphere a new thing. For at least a generation, the maximum sensible use of our productivity could have thrown a vast population out of work, or relieved everybody of a lot of useless work, depending on how you take it. Consider how little cutback of useful civilian production the economy produced the war goods and maintained an army, economically unemployed. The plain truth is that at present, very many of us are useless, not needed, rationally unemployed. It is in this paradoxical atmosphere that young persons grow up. It looks busy and expansive, but it is a rationality at a stalemate.